travel all around the country and in other parts of the world, mostly talking with people about stewardship. And I was thinking about this as I was doing the preparation for today. This is the first time anyone has ever asked me to talk specifically about stewardship of creation. And that in and of itself, I think, is kind of surprising and perhaps a little bit depressing, just to think that this is not a topic that we as members of Christ's body are thinking about in the ways that we could or should, or that we should. And so as we think about these things together this morning, I hope that we will do so in a spirit of, wow, is there an awful lot here that we have to take back to the people that we interact with, ways of thinking about sustainability in light of who we are as people of faith. And that's going to be our beginning point for this whole process. You know, when we talk about stewardship in general, and particularly stewardship of creation, we really draw on the creation narratives in the book of Genesis. And all of our thought about stewardship begins there. In the book of Genesis, as we're hearing about creation, we hear this. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth." God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." Now, I have to say, in reading that, I think we encounter a problem from the get-go, because that word dominion doesn't mean what we think of when we hear that word today. Because we have to remember that the context for this whole thought about having dominion over creation is that we're called to have the mind of God. And we know that having the mind of God really means something other than dominion in the way that we would think about it. Our bishops, in their pastoral letter on stewardship, help us to think about this from the very beginning. And what they say is this: subduing and exercising dominion do not mean abusing the earth. Rather, as the second creation story explains, God settled humankind upon the earth to be its steward, to cultivate and care for it. That's the kind of dominion that we're going to be thinking about. That's the kind of stewardship that we're going to be thinking about. It's a cultivation and a care rather than, having free rein to do whatever we do and not think about the consequences. I often tell the story that a few years ago I was invited to go to Australia to talk with people there about stewardship. I was there for about 3 weeks. And I started way up in the Diocese of Townsville, which is in the northeastern coastline near the Great Barrier Reef. And then I kind of worked my way down the eastern coastline of the continent over the course of 3 weeks. And so the very first day, there was a gathering of about 60 people, priests and lay folks, who were connected to parishes and schools there. And I said to this room full of people, when I say the word stewardship, what first comes to mind for you? And they said, is that really what people in your country think stewardship is about? And I kind of went, well, yeah, sometimes. But they've kept the original meaning of the word steward. Think about the people who are in the agricultural areas near you. The steward is the person who cares for the land or the livestock or the vineyard of another, and doesn't just take care of it like as to protect it, but actually cultivates it to yield with increase. That's more of who we're called to be. When we think about it in that way, we realize that none of this really is ours. It's God's. And we're called to care for it and to cultivate it so that it will serve well here and now, but also for the future. And I think that's part of what we as people in our world have missed over the last few hundred years and few millennia. And so I think we need to sort of bring ourselves back and remember that really it all began in a garden. And what do we learn from that garden? Well, first of all, we learn that humanity is to be in relationship with creation, and that we're to care for and cultivate creation in such a way that we actually act as God would act in our world. And we realize that each of us, as you said, each of us has something to bring, has something to contribute. And it may be something small initially, it may feel small, but those small things add up. It may be something really big. Each of us has something unique and something in particular to bring to this cultivation and care for creation, caring for all of the gifts that we have been given of our world, of our particular talents, and of all that we can do as God's people in the world. In those same creation narratives, we are told that each of us has been created in God's image and likeness. And this is a really important thing for us to try to put our arms around when we're thinking about stewardship in general, and when we're thinking specifically about stewardship of the environment or stewardship of creation. Because being created in God's image and likeness actually means that each of us is called to act as God acts in the world, or as God would want us to act in the world. Being created in the image and likeness of God means that we are to be in such a way that people see God through us. We are to be the living image of God. So much so that a friend of mine who is a scripture scholar says that when he reads those creation narratives, the thing that always comes to mind for him is that the people are told not to create idols, because the idols in that time that people carved were, images of their gods. And the people, as they carved those idols, believed that the God that they were carving somehow was present within that idol. And he says, but we are told not to create idols because we are to be the living image of God in our world. He says it's as though we're being told that we are to be the transparency through whom God is seen. Now, if we think about that in terms of all of the things that you're going to be talking about and thinking about and working toward in this next 6 months and beyond, I use that as my sort of examination of conscience on a rather regular basis. At the end of the day, I sit with myself and I reflect on, have I been the transparency through whom God is seen today? Sometimes I can say, yeah, I have been. Very often I have to admit to myself, no, not always. And whether it's in relationship to my relationships with others, my interactions with others, or whether it's in relationship to my relationship with the environment, my relationship with creation. That is a way for us to really think about this in a deeper, much more spiritual level. Because here's the thing. We are to work in collaboration with God in the ongoing creation of the world. We have a role to play. And right now, I think all of us here would say, an awful lot of time, the impact on humans isn't to build up creation, it's depleting creation. And so when we think about, water, and especially out here water, but in my part of the country as well, And we think about in my part of the country, the landscape is just being raped in a lot of places. Chemicals are being poured into farms in such a way that we're depleting creation rather than contributing to the ongoing process of creation in collaboration with God, as partners with God in this ongoing process.